Welcome in everyone to another edition of HogvilleNET Hoops. I'm your host, Kevin McPherson. It is Friday afternoon as we continue to try to grope in the dark, figure out what's going on with Arkansas transfer portal recruiting as directed by the man himself, John Calipari, the full might of the Calipari dynasty empire is really felt. We really get the ride, and we really feel like the vibes are high. Typically, most of the time when we're talking about the high school part of it. Retention we know is important. It seems a little different, a little less than a year ago. It certainly will be. But then the portal is the biggest mystery with Calipari, other than what's not a mystery is he moves in darkness at his own pace. Things don't go as quickly as the portal seems to be going because what gets exposed, what gets out in the daylight for us as it really starts to get underway, it doesn't seem like a lot. It doesn't mean that a lot's not going on behind the scenes and that Calipari's making the moves he wants to make. And a lot of times those moves are, I'm not going to overspend for guys. I've got my valuation ranges. And then fan bases get frustrated. The Arkansas fan base, I think it's even exponentially, raises the bar on frustration when the portal haul you got last year did not live up to billing. And what's interesting is the first portal class at Arkansas, Nellie Davis and Jonas Adu, they were A-list additions. And by the time those guys finally got healthy in the end of the season, when Arkansas got better and better despite some other attrition, and made a run to the Sweet 16 after going 8-10 in the SEC and being on the bubble, going down the final stretch of the regular season and into the SEC tournament, you're thinking, okay, those guys actually played up to expectations, but you didn't get a full season of it. In fact, you didn't probably get a half season of it where both of them were at their best. So when you look at Portal under Calipari, so far it's not fully satisfying, and it's never satisfying when you're looking around once the portal opens and you're seeing all these teams adding players, getting visits lined up, all these different things, and you just don't have it to that extent yet for Arkansas. We thought that with Somtu Cyril, but again, Calipari did not get into a bidding war when the stakes were raised on Somtu Cyril. And now it looks like Miami, and if it's not Miami, it's still not probably going to be Arkansas, but it looks that way. All right. So if you're not satisfied with a lot of quiet, not a whole lot there to really that has fangs and hair and teeth to get you excited about portal season. Eventually, he works his way around to getting who he wants, and again, when that hits, there's excitement level there because Calipari puts together talented rosters, and I just said, just looking at guys like Nelly Davis and Jonas Adu coming into year one, those were A-list guys, both of them ranked in some national services top 10 portal prospects. Nelly Davis on one of them at least had him as the top overall guy coming out of the portal 2 years ago. And then again at the end of the season, they kind of, lived up to some of that. And then again last year, not so much. So where is this one going? Is there a reality that he's just going to have to pony up more money to get the kind of the level of players that give Arkansas some kind of final weekend of the NCAA tournament promise or potential? Because just looking at individual players, we have felt like maybe it was there. Then we see what the shortcomings were, especially last year. And we talked about all that. I'm not going through all of it again. But the point is there a way to be proactive to make sure that doesn't happen again? And the best way to do that is to maybe get into some bidding wars. That's how some teams do it. And I don't know how much Calipari is going to stray, but we've got more intel in terms of front line guys. And that's where we want to start today. We don't have a visit confirmed, but we got another Zoom confirmed, and this is not source information. The other stuff we've been talking about with guys like Robert Wright, Mo Sylla, and Zoom meetings, and trying to effort visits with both, and maybe there could potentially be a secret, silent weekend visitor. We know Calipari loves doing that stuff, but we brought you that intel. That wasn't something you got from a national source and someone on the national level. We really kind of put you in the place of the Zoom meeting. And I was told somebody making fun of Zoom meetings. I don't know if it was what the full context of it in terms of, either covering the portal or Arkansas's version of the portal. Whoever it was making fun of it. It's an important part of the process, especially when you were in a dead period. Again, this is the first day of the live recruiting period where players doesn't matter what the school is and how far along they are. They couldn't get them on campus until now, starting today. And so Zoom is a part of bridging to that. And when you can't get players on campus, it's a great way to make sure that you're on more than just on a phone call, front and center on the radar a little bit more. You just continue to progress there. And that was the big word we used yesterday was progress. But finally, we got some national folks bringing the news, and this is how we learned of it today. How about Aiden Sherrell? Now, we've been talking about him. I brought him up yesterday in one of my three segments in a 24-hour span, so I'm not sure which one they all ran together, but it's kind of brought him back up as we talked about him before when it was announced he was going in, and then he went in, and the no contact tag, and for a while it was Michigan State seemed to be maybe that's where he's headed, and that kind of thing. And I even speculated, is he doing a Flory Badunga deal last year with Kansas? Once more NIL, going to put his name in there and see if he can get it back and stay where he's at. Well, now we've got a list of schools emerging, not only Michigan State, Michigan, and Michigan just pulled a 4-5 combo, JP Estrella, one of the, more coveted big men, obviously, if Michigan's going after him, Dusty May. But Michigan in the mix, Duke. In fact, I think the reporting was coming from Tipton. I think this is from Joe Tipton and On Three Sports, that Sherrell's going to take visits to Baylor, Duke, in some combination through the weekend. I think Baylor first, then Duke. So I don't know if these are abbreviated visits or just one right after the other, and it's a 4-day long weekend type of thing. I'm not sure about those details. But what I do know is Tipton also reported that Arkansas had a Zoom with Aiden Sherrell. And so here's another proof of concept. And this is considered an A-list portal guy, on the front line, and a big body, which we've said that was what Arkansas was missing. There's some other things this guy hasn't necessarily proven he can do that would go along with the big body and make it even more enticing, but still an A-list guy nonetheless. Tipton reporting a Zoom with Calipari. But you got other schools now, doing more than that, getting visits. And a lot of times with these portal guys, because it's like speed dating or whatever they used to call it in the 80s, it goes a lot faster than high school recruiting, and decisions are made a lot quicker. It doesn't move. The portal doesn't move at the pace that Calipari likes, but that's only what we see, not necessarily what's going on behind the scenes. So we don't know. But what I was told, I do have a little intel about this. I have a source that I trust on this that said that the Zoom meeting, you hear this, it went well, but it went well enough for Arkansas to feel like they may have a real chance to get him in on a visit. And again, advantage a lot of times goes to the first team that gets you on campus, or one of the first two if you've got back-to-backs planned and you're definitely taking them. And sometimes that's enough where these teams do what they need to do to secure a commitment, get the player signed, and they don't take other visits that they were considering. And we know Calipari can be stubborn about his stopping points on NIL. Stubborn's not necessarily a bad word. That people take that with a negative connotation. It can be bad. It can be a sign of an unwillingness to do things that you probably need to do. And it could also be proof that a guy that's had the wildest success as a recruiter, maybe not portal, but when you look at all things considered and how he builds rosters and getting plenty of talent, that you need to somewhat stick to your formula, stick to your knitting. Don't fully change who you are, but you might want to just adjust a little bit. Stuff I've been talking about. Where is this with Sherrell? If the staff feels good that they can take another step and work him in for a visit, that's where it stood based on the intel that I got on this. Things change quickly. I could record this, it could publish, and by the time you see it for the first time, we've already learned that Cheryl's whatever. But for now, that's positive. Just like we gave you positive feedback yesterday, and we're going to talk about these guys, Mo Sylla and Robert Wright III. So we'll see what's going on here with Aiden Sherrell in Arkansas, but at least here's another frontline name outside of Somtu Cyril, and then Mo Sylla, who we talked about yesterday and brought you multiple pieces of intel. We really kind of shed the best light on it early in the day when I told you that I had a source telling me that his representation had circled back to Arkansas, and it's kind of timing wise coinciding with Arkansas and Sylla parting ways when Arkansas led and was the leader in the clubhouse. And I had sources thought it was pretty much a done deal. You know this. We don't have to relive all that, but it made sense on Sylla because we brought you reporting weeks ago before the season ended, the regular season ended, when we were talking about Cyril and the mutual interest. Other sources saying Mo Sylla, who had private commit to Calipari coming out of the 2025 class. We know all this, has been on Arkansas's campus for a day, a very fast day-long visit. Very unusual for a high school player unless it's an unofficial visit. And then he ends up going to Georgia Tech after a private commit to Cal because of the Yellow Jackets and their previous coaching staff, now departed, now fired. Stoudemire upping his NIL bag. I was told it was exceeded the amount that he initially was seeking. And so maybe he got into a bidding war and they jumped to a place where the bidding war took it, or where the asking price went. And Calipari, like he does, no, I'm good. I'm good. Go ahead. And so he's had half a freshman season, missed the second half due to injuries. He put up some good numbers, showed some promise. Is he an A-list guy? He's one of those that you may say that after the fact. There's a high ceiling here. I would say he's got a ceiling that's higher than some of the guys we would consider A-list now based on their body of work. So if you're projecting and that's part of it too, you can convince yourself this guy's high on my board, on our big board, and should be. We see him as an A-lister. I can get down with that maybe. Well, let's see. And you might get it at a reduced price relative to some of these other guys with more experience that are asking for more. This is probably one because he didn't get the full season in that you might not have to spend as much on and still get great results of it. 6'10", 240. So the intel yesterday went from Arkansas and the camp getting back in the mix here. The source that led me to that follow up was one telling me, hey, don't avert your eyes away from Sylla in Arkansas just because it looks like a done deal for West Virginia. Now it could still end up being West Virginia or somebody else trying to get in. But Arkansas not only both camps getting back in cahoots recently, then I later in last night's episode brought you an update that Arkansas had a Zoom with Sylla, set up a Zoom meeting with Sylla. And so this is all positive. And I've told you both with this player and one that we're about to talk about in the backcourt that based on the Zoom meetings, there were positive vibes coming from them in the sense of this could maybe take the next step. And so because we were talking about yesterday, is Arkansas going to be able to really consummate that visit that they feel like they're going to have? And it was Isaiah Johnson who we're about to talk about. We're wondering Rob Wright, who we're about to talk about, both guards. Maybe Sylla. Maybe there's a pathway for that. So we're keeping an eye on that. Let's see what happens. Again, Calipari on the left coast for Darius A. Cup Jr.'s, there for the Wooden Award ceremony. He made the 5 finalists list. We'll see what happens. I'm sure Cam Boozer's the odds-on favorite. I don't know if Vegas is taking bets on that, putting prop bets out on the Wooden Award, but I'm sure Cam Boozer's the odds-on favorite. He's racked up the other National Player of the Year awards. But Acuff, just like everything else, has been in the mix in the finalist list on all of these things, and it's a great. And he made their All-American team, so I'm sure that honor is not only worthy of Calipari being there with him, which he does with his players, which is part of his branding for recruiting and everything, but it's also genuine. It's just who he is. That's why players love him, families love him, that kind of thing, and he likes to help families. This is part of that process. So is there a chance for him to get back like he's done in the past on official visit weekends, gone off to support a player or do something else, a speaking engagement? He's done different things that he made commitments to, and he's been able to work around it and schedule visits around some of that stuff. He's a jet setter to do what he thinks needs to get done. Could he be coming back for this a first week potential weekend visit now that the recruiting period's back open where you can do that? Remember, yesterday was still Thursday was still it was the final day of a week long dead period where there's no on campus activity or off. So all right, so could Sylla be part of a plan to get someone in this weekend, or does that go away? I mentioned Calipari could stay on the left coast for Saturday's Nike Hoop Summit just up the coast in Portland, going from LA to Portland for Jordan Smith Jr., Abdu Torre, and then guys you are recruiting that are not in the bag, Mika Miranen and Paulo Cerui. At least we don't think they're in the bag. We're going to learn a lot more about how Calipari finishes out. Maybe it's not just portal to build this roster. Maybe there's an international flavor. Miranen would certainly fit that. A reclass, Osarui would fit that. There's other things that we're going to get into here as we give you more intel. All right, so is there really any new intel than what we told you with Sylla? Only that today I circled back to the source that gave one of the sources that gave me some stuff yesterday that we talked about, and they said, well, there's nothing that's been a backslide on this, and from their vantage point, that this thing may be moving toward more, which would be getting them on campus and maybe consummating a commitment, but not any sense of Arkansas being the lead. That was the messaging yesterday. We're still there for now. Not for Mo Sylla. Isaiah Johnson. Now here's the twist. We gave you intel the last couple of days about Arkansas not only putting together an NIL package for this guy that was pretty good, pretty darn good from the way it was told to me. and that they were efforting a visit. Certainly, now I never got intel that specifically said they had a Zoom meeting with him, but I'm assuming since that's what they've been doing before the official visits could start today, that they did this with Isaiah Johnson too to get that far down the road. All right. And then we told you, okay, they're trying to get him on campus, Arkansas this weekend, but so is Kansas. And I was talking to a Kansas beat writer and through the day, and when I came back on at midnight, I didn't have an update. I don't know if it's Arkansas or Kansas still. He didn't know. And the reason we didn't know, and the reason why neither one of those emerged for a weekend visit, had nothing to do with where Calipari is. It had everything to do with the fact that Texas is getting him in on a visit. And man, Sean Miller, they're stepping strong. How about David Punch? They're expected to host both of these guys for the weekend. Will they overlap or visit together? I don't know. But those are definitely two A-list guys. One, a power forward at 6'7", 245, and Isaiah Johnson, a prolific freshman guard in college basketball, Big 12 stud. I mean, led the Colorado Buffs, 17 points per game, 3 assists, 3 rebounds. We've gone through all his stats. But it's looking more and more like Texas is going to be the play there. And I'm told that the NIL price tag, because you've got multiple teams in on it, what happens? You get into a situation where, you're driving up your NIL promises, and Arkansas has a cap. And it looks to me like, that Calipari's like, okay, take your Texas visit. Now, does that mean that that'll be the end of it and he'll commit to Texas? Maybe. Could Arkansas still be in it? I don't have enough to say no. I did confer with somebody, not necessarily a source on this, in particular for me leading up to my reach out to them when I heard the Texas thing to say, what's your feel on this? Another national recruiting, it's a national recruiting analyst. And he basically said, look, he goes, you know how Calipari is, and he's got his limits. And he goes, I've heard that Texas is really willing to meet some of these players and their reps closer to their just inflated asking prices than some other schools. And so I weigh that in, and knowing how Calipari is, he's not going to step out of bounds on what his range is and even where his wiggle room grows. I guess at some point he may shock us and do something like that. But to this point, weighing what I heard about what Texas is willing to do and where Arkansas typically is with Calipari, and the fact that Arkansas was close to maybe getting the guy on campus this weekend, Kansas was efforting the same, and it ended up being Texas. Well, boom, there. That may be where that's headed. We'll see. We don't know that. But what we do know is that Arkansas has been serious about Isaiah Johnson. They've also been serious about Robert Wright III. And we did tell you, we did break the news yesterday on our midday show that Arkansas did a Zoom with Robert Wright III. And again, if you want to laugh at the Zoom, it doesn't, when we said it, there's no point in trying to make it more than it is. It's just the next step and hopefully getting them on campus for a visit. But each step, and we told you the vibes coming out of that was that it was still a positive process, that Arkansas progressed in this recruitment, knowing that there are other players in it. But what's weird about these other schools that are in play for this guy is a lot of them, it looks like other guards are about to line up with these other schools, which leaves Arkansas and maybe some other suitors. But I mean, Texas bringing in Isaiah Johnson. Texas is one of the schools efforting here. Kentucky, Zoom Diallo from, Washington, a guard. Louisville, we told you that was one of the schools in the mix here when we were talking about Robert Wright and presenting all this the last couple of days. Louisville looks like moving ahead and getting Shellstad. I think they're getting a visit this weekend from Shellstad and DeGard out of Oregon, and Flory Badunga, the number one overall by most opinions on the national level portal player out of Kansas. So we'll see. But Shellstad seems to be like maybe Louisville's going to be the destination. So these are some Ohio State getting Justin Pippen. We're going to talk more about him in a little bit. I'm going to bring you guys some intel on 3 different guards that have Arkansas ties or Arkansans, and at least I would say two of which have had some connections to Arkansas in the past in terms of playing, Razorback recruitment. So I'm going to bring you some intel on several things. It's some interesting stuff that's come up. But at any rate, the teams that were really heavily in the mix here seem to be close to adding guards, where Arkansas, although they've moved the ball down the field with Isaiah Johnson and Robert Wright, less information to suggest they're viewed as, the likely leader, in the clubhouse. We've only said that about one player so far, frontline Aiden Sherrell. We don't have to go through all that again, but just to make a comparison to where you're talking leader. We haven't been there yet with these, other than there's positive stuff coming out of Zoom meetings and that kind of thing for there to now be a coordination to get a visit. And again, if they have a visitor this weekend, if they figure that out in Calipari, let's see what he does. Does he stay on the West Coast all weekend? It tells me Arkansas probably didn't do anything unless they snuck someone after midnight last night when it technically opened and spent some time, being really creative through the night or part of the night. Maybe he slept on the trip there and they're doing stuff and part of the day before Calipari has to travel out to LA. You just don't know that. You don't know if there's something later in the weekend or late weekend. Let's say Calipari gets back and they start a visit on Sunday and didn't wait till the start of the. We don't know yet, and we may never know. We may know after the fact because of how quiet things are at Arkansas. It doesn't typically or always get announced by one of the national guys. That's slow for that to happen. When that has happened, a lot of times with the national guys, it's once the player's already there, basically in Fayetteville. All right, so we kind of went around the block there. But Robert Wright the third, I just went through some of the teams that Arkansas is competing with. So it looks like other guards lining up with potentially. If it plays out like I laid it out, you'd think, okay, doesn't that make Arkansas the front runner? This guy had a reported $3.5 million payday at BYU last year. I said before when I brought that up, this guy's asking for a lot of money, but I was always skeptical. Did he really get 3.5 million? He's one of the ones where you hear that huge number. I just never fully bought that. And I'm wondering, is that now he's trying to get it because he had another great season? He's one of the top, speaking of top portal prospects, arguably top five out there. Another 6'1" guard. Arkansas has been not bashful going after these highly productive guards that can versatile in the backcourt. One can be one or two, can help you both ways there. So took a big sigh there. I'm trying to catch my breath and where do I see this? I mean, if he did make 3.5 million and he's trying to get more, that may be just and these other schools are lining up with other guards that we just said. And Calipari's not going to be. I just don't see him paying 3.5 million or 3 million. I'm going to be honest. If he wouldn't have paid Somtu Cyril 2.5 million, you can argue this is a better player relative to position. But bigs get more just because they're big. I would be surprised if Arkansas would go there for this guy. I mean, just being honest. And so, does this end up being a situation? Maybe Arizona. I've heard Arizona maybe trying to get in the mix here, another Big 12 school. So, does this guy end up back at BYU? If the 3.5 is real, why were you ever trying to leave? Because you're not. That's going to be hard to command more than that anywhere. All right, I kind of did my soapbox on that. I'm skeptical. A lot of these NIL numbers are inflated. Certainly, the agents are doing it to start high and negotiate as high as they can at a lower amount. Right? Try to find a sweet spot that's elevated over if they didn't come in with some of the stuff that might seem ridiculous. That seems to be a reality of how things are working now. And Calipari's going to keep his head, man. He always does. He's not going to react or rush or do anything. He's not going to panic sign or whatever they call it. Anyway, it gets funny. Here's a little bit of intel for you. I had one of my NBA scouts give me all kinds of great info, and I'm dialed in with them, especially right now because they're on site at Nike Hoop Summit. Before that, Chipotle Nationals. Before that, the McDonald's All American game. Later, it'll be the Jordan Brand Classic. But for now, they're really locked in, and they're seeing a lot of these college level guys coming out of not only the high school ranks, but they're dialed in with these NIL agents as well as other college coaches on players in general. And so one of my NBA scout sources told me they had just called me and said, "Man, I just got off the phone with a Division I assistant coach that mentioned Arkansas amongst a handful of teams that are looking at Jeremiah Wilkinson." Now, this is a stud guard for Georgia. This dude was wrecking the SEC this year. We know this was an NCAA tournament team. We know, like roaches, the players on this team were scattering into the portal. Somtu Cyril wasn't the only one. And we told you back when we were talking about Cyril and Arkansas's mutual interest during the regular season, we said it won't just be Cyril. It'll be a bunch of dudes from Georgia, I'm told, are trying to get out. Well, this is one that's in the portal, and now Arkansas's name's mentioned it here. And so we'll see. Zoom call upcoming? Question mark? Well, we're keeping an eye on it. What else? Where could this really be? I was just told that Arkansas was mentioned by a Division I coach, not at Arkansas, but that they were asking about Wilkinson, and we're told He's kind of right now talking to 5 or 6 schools, and Arkansas was one of them. And if you look at him statistically, impact, usage, a lot of the stuff, it lines up with guys like Isaiah Johnson and Robert Wright III, and it's similar size-wise. All those guys are, 6'1" or so. But you don't look at they're big enough to be great, man. I mean, they're really good players. And then so this would be a really good player out of the SEC, and we know Calipari's not bashful about taking players from the SEC out of the portal, the few that he gets. Mostly been frontline so far, but why not Jeremiah Wilkinson? So we don't have any real intel other than Arkansas's on a list of schools. I don't have anything deeper than that, but it's something to keep an eye on. Here's one that's interesting. I found it very interesting. I had um, this happens from time to time. Fans interact with me on DMs and I guess the DMs, and they send me screenshots of stuff. And I got a screenshot of Trilly Donovan linking. Um, and I don't know if it was a conversation of someone talking about what Trilly Donovan, you know who Trilly is, and or if it was something Trilly was saying. I'm not good with figuring all that out. But what it said is that Bryson Warren, who we did talk about not that long ago, and that Arkansas, it was thought that Arkansas might be getting in touch with him, that kind of a thing. I mean, playing in the G League, we know that these guys that weren't drafted, there's certain levels that the NCAA has cleared the way for. Players that are just G League had been in the G League and hadn't played in NBA games yet. But we were talking about Bryson Warren. Well, apparently the messaging today that was sent to me was somehow Trilly Donovan talking about Texas being involved with Bryson Warren, which makes sense because I knew what we told you before was that Arkansas might reach out. They had some level of interest despite the talking points Calipari goes through all the time. And this was weeks and weeks ago. I mean, it was a while back when the season was still going on. And what I was told was from a source that Warren was definitely going to finish out his G League season because I think it was around the time that it was so long ago. It was it wasn't even toward the end of the season. It was around the time where teams at the midterms were looking at maybe trying to get players in, and some were, and getting commitments from guys that have been like I said, pro level G League, and so it might have. So it was way back when, actually, when we were talking about it. But the new stuff is Texas connected to it. And when we were talking about it then, I said, well, my source said, yeah, there's some teams showing interest in Arkansas had actually considered reaching out and might, but that they were going to wait. They weren't going to join anywhere at midterm, any school. They were going to wait to play out the G League season and keep their pro options open. But that had still been a priority. So I gave you that source info. All right. So Trilly's now saying Texas and Bryson Warren. Sorry, I stumbled through that a little bit. I couldn't remember the timeline. It was driving me crazy. I'm like, it wasn't toward the end of the season like a lot of these portal names we talking about. It was before that. And then I remembered midterm. So it was a while back. But anyway, so I'm circling back to find out through my sources, Arkansas involved here at all. Just because Trilly's saying Texas doesn't mean that he doesn't. A lot of these national guys don't know what's going on with Calipari any more than what we're trying to figure out because it's just not as prevalent. He does a great job of shielding it from everybody until he wants for something to get out there. All right. So my source is telling me Arkansas has not contacted Bryson Warren to this point as we're on. I mean, this was a 5-star guard. At one time ranked top 15 in the country in the class of 2023. Same as former Hog and current DePaul Blue Demon uh, uh, Leighton Blocker, right? Both 6'2", 6'3" guards coming out of the same class and Arkansas kids. Bryson Warren played at North Little Rock and then Little Rock Central. And then he went to Overtime Elite and was there a couple of years. Then he's been in the G League for a few years, done well. So just to catch everybody up. So this is an Arkansas kid. Arkansas's not made contact. We'll see. I mean, here's another combo guard that, you're looking at prolific scoring guards. This would fit the bill. Andy's improved as a guy that can play on the one and facilitate. So we keep our eyes open on that. But I think another thing that's interesting about it, I was told outside of Texas, my sources also told me there are other schools that are in the SEC, he said. But the way he worded it was, I said, so who else, if not Arkansas, but Texas? And he goes, well, it's multiple schools, and Texas isn't the only school in the SEC. Texas and Arkansas aren't the only schools in the SEC. was worded like that. I'm like, oh, so there's some other SEC schools. Kentucky, Kentucky was one of the names when we were talking about it before months ago that I was told was, poking ahead in there. Maybe Kentucky's one of them. But Trilly saying Texas. All right. I'll give you some more intel on Arkansas kid, not really related to the Razorbacks, but Lane Taylor, who we talked about forever out of Farmington, played for UCA as a freshman when Arkansas defeated the Bears down in North Little Rock. And that series of games that started back under Eric Patrick Melsman 6 years ago, Arkansas's played UCA more than any other Division I in-state schools. In fact, Little Rock is the only other one a couple of times, plus I think an exhibition game. But UCA, typically that game's played against Arkansas in Fayetteville. It was again this past season, but 2 years ago when Lane Taylor was there, it was played in North Little Rock. And then Lane Taylor transferred to Murray State, got a nice NIL bag, back in the transfer portal. So I have a coaching source on the Division I level just called me up and said, he goes, I'm hearing, and this is a coach that had some level of interest in trying to convince Lane Taylor to go to their school, but he told me that he's hearing that Lane Taylor is going to end up at Arkansas State. So in-state kid, in-state school, started at UCA, went to Murray State. Looks like and Little Rock's really been strong in play with its new coaching staff. Travis Ford, something would have to blow up. This assistant coach told me for Lane Taylor not to end up at Arkansas State, and that we could hear something as soon as Sunday or Monday. So we'll see. Things change. NIL's obviously something that some other school could say, hey, you know what? We do have a little more money for you. Maybe you ought to reconsider. But anybody that a lot of Hog fans are familiar with Lane Taylor. Remember, he played at Farmington, right there, basically Fayetteville. And so a lot of fans around the state were familiar with him. I remember I used to talk with Eric Patrick Melsman about him. He goes, I love him. I love the kid. I remember when he played with the Arkansas Hawks and Honor Boateng and some of the other guys that some of the high majors were recruiting and some of the live eval periods, and you'd have high major coaches out to watch the Hawks. And I was assuming it was for, one or two of the, high major prospects that were already known and ranked in the national services. And Purdue's entire staff, including Painter, were there courtside. I'm like, Honor Boateng and Painter he and I had a lot of great conversations over the years at these events. And he goes, we're here to see Lane Taylor. And Purdue's not afraid to go out and get a smallish guard that ain't your stereotypical high major 6', 6'1" guy. Because a lot of those that you're watching around the landscape are quick twits and crazy athletic, maybe, or some other stuff. And these guys aren't quite that. They're just really good basketball players. Anyway, so that's a Lane Taylor update for you. Not that we needed to spend as much time as I did. I like to talk. One more. We mentioned Justin Pippen to Ohio State. Pippen was that Scottie Pippen's son. He was one that when he again transferred from Michigan after his freshman season, competed against Arkansas in the Big Apple at Madison Square Garden. Arkansas won that game. He hit a three in that game. Didn't play a whole lot for Michigan that year. Transferred to Cal. Had a really good year in the ACC. A good player. Off to Ohio State. But he was a guy that when he got in the portal, I knew for a fact that they wanted Arkansas and Calipari to recruit him. And I was keeping an eye on it. I brought him up before. It's just let's keep an eye on it, see what Calipari does in terms of what kind of player he's going to go after in the portal if it's going to have to go backcourt because you're losing Acuff and probably Malik Thomas. And certainly once we learn DJ Wagner, would Justin Pippen be that kind of level guy? And it's Arkansas ties, right? Scottie Pippen played with the Arkansas Hawks, got to cover him in person a lot, and wanted to be a Razorback. So there's that. There's some intel for you. One last thing. This was interesting. I mentioned fans. This time of year, they send me a lot of stuff. I had someone DM me and say, who is this guy? Because he followed Arkansas men's basketball's, I don't know which social media platform, but he followed it and asked me about him. And I remember Arkansas actually had some level of recruitment for this kid as an international player. Now he's in the portal, played a freshman season at Virginia Tech. Let's get him on the screen here. Neoklis Avdalas, a 6'9", I don't know what he is, a combo guard, a wing, a 3-4, it's undetermined, but, he's a guy that has been talked about as an international player out of Greece. So rest in peace to my sweet mom who recently passed. As she told me growing up, she's mostly Greek. She grew up in a Greek community in New York and moved to Arkansas to Little Rock when she was in high school, and so, she was so proud of that Greek heritage. But mom would love this. Mom, not the biggest sports person, but if she were around and I was telling her that someone might have something going on with Arkansas that's a Greek player, she would love that. All right, enough about that. Who knows what it means that he followed a social media account? I don't usually comment on this stuff. Recently, I did one on Brandon Garrison and something he did on social media, and I thought Arkansas fans would kind of roll their eyes at that, so I kind of brought it tongue in cheek. But with Calipari, you just never know. And this is another one. What's going on there? The same fan that sent that to me in a DM later said, well, he's unfollowed the account now, and I'm like, "Okay, who knows?" I don't really know how to track all that stuff, but I do find it interesting only because Arkansas had a level of recruiting interest in this guy this time a year ago, but it was an international player, not a portal. Now he's in the portal out of Virginia Tech. You look at it, not the most efficient guy in the world, 5 3-pointers a game, 31%. Maybe there's something that you can get some growth there. None of the numbers, I mean, 67% free throw shooter, 6'9". You see a lot of these European guys that are a little taller with some skill level, and they like to be ball dominant and you run things through them. And maybe there was some experimentation with that at Virginia Tech, but it was kind of a schizophrenic freshman season in terms of what am I seeing here? What how does this guy really project? What is he? Defensively, a lot is maybe more question marks. So I don't know if there's real interest here, other than Arkansas had an interest in him among the international players, and we were bringing a lot of international names because some of them came to the forefront more than others. This is one not as much, but there was a level of Arkansas recruitment there this time a year ago, and so it's the only reason I bring it. Um, all right, we're getting close here to, well, we're 36 minutes. We've been trying to cut these down a little more and more each time.